Hey, just before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe if you haven't, leave a comment with a request on what I should cover next, and follow me on Twitch for horror gaming streams and on Instagram for other general stuff. Enjoy the video. I know it's September and summer is technically over, but I never got a chance to cover a single seasonally themed horror topic this year, so bear with me as I share with you this little demonic gem that should scratch a strange cosmic itch. Southbound is a 2015 road trip themed psychological horror anthology that reteams several of the twisted minds behind the cult hit VHS to deliver an eerily enigmatic and meticulously inventive take on a familiar format. While the premise sees us passively observe 5 different morality tales about individuals confronted with their literal personal demons, the real unique selling point of Southbound is how it seamlessly frames its stories around one consistent real-time world. I mean, yeah, a framing story isn't unheard of, but if you're into fierce ambiguity, hypothesizing over lore, and being left to piece together nuggets of information to build a vivid picture of a subtly surreal, nightmarish hellscape, this one is worth a visit. However, if you're someone who craves answers being handed to them, be aware that Southbound never surrenders its mystery. While there is a clear and logical vision for each tale and what it's about, the film will never stop to explain itself or provide closure, which is fittingly in line with the tormented mindset of its characters. So if you're intrigued, fasten your seatbelt because the highway to hell is a bumpy ride. Yeah, the overarching metaphor is as subtle as a bitch slap. Now, before we drive into the madness, this video is sponsored by Raycon. Remember back to school shopping as a kid, new notebooks, new shoes, new routines? I might not be in school anymore because God, I'm old, but I still love that feeling of starting fresh. That's why this fall I'm calling it Back to Cool, God, I'm Old, because Raycon's Everyday Earbuds Classic are my must-have for getting back into a routine and making everything feel a little smoother and a lot cooler. I use Raycon's Everyday Earbuds Classic on the regular, particularly when listening to music and podcasts while enjoying my morning coffee and walking my dog Cheddar. Everyday Classics are a great way to chill out and detox between my hefty workdays, and with 32 hours of battery life with the case and quick charge function, I'm always ready for some quality audio self-care. Raycons have a comfortable ergonomic design so they stay in no matter what I'm doing, and with the press of a button I can switch between active noise cancellation to drown out the noise of the world and awareness mode so I can hear my surroundings and stay safe when on the go. And look, here's the crazy part. Raycon quality rivals the big premium audio brands at only half the price. No more overpaying just to get great sound. Over 3 million customers already love Raycons, and with a 30-day happiness guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Simply scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description box below and visit buyraycon.com/Ryan to get 20% off site-wide. That's buyraycon.com/Ryan. So, just to give you a taste for what's to come before I contextualize the unique structure of the film, Southbound opens by thrusting us into the shoes of 2 bloodied and distressed men called Mitch and Jack, trying to escape what are basically grim reaping angels of death, who oversee the world as symbols of judgment, jury, and extremely violent execution. In fact, it's actually easy to miss that they keep up appearances throughout the film by lingering in the background of each character's story, like a vulture patiently waiting to inevitably pick at the carcass of a roadkill, thus sustaining the broodingly macabre overtone of the world itself. Labelled in the credits as The Way Out, our cold opening perfectly consolidates the film's commitment to ambiguity, implication, world building, and leaving you to interpret what you see for yourself. As segment writer-director David Bruckner explained to Michael Gingold of Fangoria, the movie is about maintaining momentum by putting the viewer in the midst of ongoing action and being hit with an immediate sense of bewilderment and adrenaline as death constantly lingers close by. You are left just as baffled as Mitch and Jack, who by morning arrive at a gas station to find the occupants eerily indifferent to the creature's existence. As the creatures close in, they drive on but discover themselves constantly looping back to the same gas station, instantly confirming that we're dealing with a hellish limbo where there is no escape. Kinda like that recent MGM series From, but with less of that obnoxious mystery box bollocks. Despite their efforts to keep driving in the hopes of making it home, Mitch gives in and accepts the futility of his fate, telling Jack that the creatures have come to collect, presumably as punishment for something that they've done. Resistant to his own fate, Jack is then brutally killed by one of the angels, leaving Mitch to retreat to a nearby motel room where he's confronted by eternal torment as he finds himself chasing a restless vision of his daughter Catherine, but is unable to reach her. He's bound to a painful labyrinth, a personal nightmare, a dimension in which he relives his emotional suffering indefinitely. We don't know what's happened to his daughter, but it's strongly implied she's died, given the photo Mitch mournfully holds earlier in the truck. We don't know what he and Jack did, although the reason will become clear by the end. The blood on both men obviously gives us a strong insinuation for Mitch's guilt. However, instead of following him further down a personal rabbit hole, the door to his world soon closes and another one next to him opens, and our attention is diverted towards it. Fitting to the overarching time loop, this story does come full circle by the end, but for now, what you've seen in this 10-minute opening is emblematic of how Southbound chooses to tell its story. We are only ever passive observers drifting by at a distance, and by foregoing exposition and blatant explanation for the madness, it captures this suffocating and confusing sensation of being trapped in a personal hell, and reliving that pain, guilt, regret, and trauma. The desert setting is a perfect choice for this. It's desolate and otherworldly. In fact, the sensation is very pre-backrooms and liminal space hysteria in how it conveys the emotional paradox of purgatory. The place between heaven and hell is like the land between destinations. It's lonely and isolating, but also desolate and empty. It's expansive, and yet you feel more trapped than ever. It constantly evokes two polar opposite extremes to maintain a perpetual restlessness. Fucking nailed it. The best, albeit most twisted way to describe watching each story moving forward is like gawking at a car crash with morbid curiosity while slowly passing by in traffic and being left a little shamelessly annoyed that you didn't get a good enough look to fully understand what happened. If you couldn't tell by my choice of words and descriptions, the movie is very aggressive about the road trip motif. As Bruckner explained in multiple interviews, particularly the main source I'll be using to explain the filmmaker's intent, Stephen Sato at The Movable Fest, Southbound overcomes the constant stop and start setups of most anthologies by simply having the camera gravitate into the next story while the current one is still ongoing. Outside the opening and closing credits, there are no big title cards or sharp cuts to a new story. At some point, we just naturally move on while keeping the rules and logic of the world intact. Perhaps the best structural comparison I can make is to Richard Linklater's seminal 1990 indie flick Slacker, where the camera will randomly follow different people just going about their day, with no rhyme or reason or pre-planned destination in mind, and simply moves on when it gets bored or distracted. Of course, the difference here is that each tale comes with a haunting moral and somewhat of a conclusion. In fact, it does have a slight structural similarity to David Bruckner's The Signal, but I'll come back to that film another time. As Radio Silence's Tyler Gillette ultimately explains, Southbound was conceived around avoiding the first act problem of most anthology films. It doesn't need to reset itself after each new story, thus allowing the overall mythology to develop seamlessly throughout. This is why the movie gives the sensation of being on a car journey. The filmmakers envisioned the world exactly as they saw it on a road trip in the desert and scouting for film locations. Specifically, Radio Silence came up with this concept of zipper transitions, where you're tracking one story and it naturally leads to another, causing you to shift gears and pursue that one instead. However, at the same time, while you might not see every small thing play out, if you pay attention, you will get enough insight insight to piece together theories and an understanding of what was happening. My favourite element that's somehow both blatant and subtle because I missed it the first time is the shock jock radio DJ played by Larry Fessenden. His narration is the closest thing we get to pure exposition, as he alludes to the morals of each tale using driving and journey motifs that play in the background as events take place. It's almost charming how on the nose the monologue is. Regret and remorse, amends and atonement, that's life. To all the lost souls racing down that long road to redemption, and all the sinners running from their past but heading straight into that pit of darkness, we're all on the same endless highway. The one with no name and no exits, looking for a way out of tonight and into tomorrow. They'll try and stop you, but you just gotta keep fucking moving, because this is your highway, and today might be the day you finally outrun those wicked demons once and for all, because in the end, we're all just trying to find our way home. Like, I obviously can't play the clip due to copyright reasons, so that's my best Larry Fessenden impression, and fuck me, do I know it's bad. Nonetheless, that is literally the entire thesis for the story. In fact, producer, writer, and director Roxanne Benjamin poetically summarized the themes to Movable Fest as living in that circle of sorrow, reliving your regrets and your mistakes. You have the opportunity to change, you have the opportunity to make the right decision. Can you ever get out of your way enough to do so? This point is important because, as the opening suggests, the characters are basically confronted with a choice. They can find a path to redemption and escape the nightmare, or keep trying to run from their mistakes and remain sinners in eternal darkness. Anyway, on to the rest of the film. Okay, so I'll not linger too much on the specifics of each story, but our next two tales, Siren and The Accident, complement each other as one continuous through line that highlights the opposite roads of damnation and redemption. Siren follows immediately after The Way Out, where we see a jazz band also trying to make their way home, only to get a flat tire and end up hitching a ride from a strange oddball couple. The DJ's narration infers to missing that special someone, which is later associated to the guilt that one member of the band feels, called Sadie, when it's revealed that she once abandoned her friend Alex at a bar to pursue sexual escapades, and it indirectly led to her death, which the other bandmates now hold against her. Outside her personal struggles, the story further cements the otherworldliness of the setting, when the couple explain they've lived here since the war, seemingly suggesting their long-lost souls in this purgatorial wasteland. At times, the film borders on uncanny. Like Sadie, I did a number of retakes when picking up on certain details, like how the group described the couple as almost ageless, in how they act old but don't seem to look old, as if cosplaying from a different era. In fact, there's an unusual artifice to the house itself. It's got a tinge of both 60s and modern design, and it just goes to reinforce the film's continual sense of discomfort and paradox. Eventually, Sadie's bandmates end up vomiting a strange black bile after consuming what's assumed to be contaminated meat during an awkward dinner party, and are given a mysterious medicine by the husband Deal. Of course, it's obvious that the couple have a nefarious motive to possess the group into becoming part of this deranged family, which Sadie is able to resist, leaving her desperate and alone to fight her way out. Nightmares of Alex's death continue to weigh on Sadie until she witnesses her friends participating in a cultic ritual that, in my interpretation, is designed to invite demons to possess human vessels, which in turn also explains why the gas station occupants were indifferent to the creatures chasing Jack and Mitch. I will come back to this in more detail later, but what we'll see in the fourth story is that while we might be on Earth, hell itself seems to be invading and ravaging this land for its own doing, becoming a sort of vortex for sinners who subconsciously gravitate towards it to face judgment. The title Siren seemingly gets its name from Sadie's newly possessed friends trying to seduce her into joining them, soon leading Sadie to escape onto a road in the dead of night, only to be completely completely obliterated by an oncoming car, whose driver is distracted with looking at pictures of his wife while talking to her on the phone. She faces brutal punishment because she constantly runs away from her problems, although I'll admit the logic doesn't entirely add up as to what she's actually supposed to do. Granted, demons will be demons. Like with Mitch, it's as if it's already too late to change anything, and it would be simply better for her to accept her fate and embrace the cult rather than be doomed to repeat the painful car accident, like how Jack and Mitch looped around the gas station until Mitch finally conceded. From here, the burden falls onto the driver Lucas, who attempts to do all that he can to help, as the DJ proclaims that one should not linger on the things you leave behind. You cannot undo what's been done. The obvious moral to Lucas's journey is the guilt of a car accident in a prior life. He attempts to contact 911, but ends up having no choice but putting the severely mangled and violently twitching, suffering Sadie in the back of his car to get her to a nearby hospital. This story is straight up squeamish body horror, as Lucas does miraculously find the time, but surprise surprise, discovers the hospital is abandoned and is soon forced to perform emergency surgery under the guidance of a responder he manages to get into contact with. The voices on the other end of the phone did little to reassure me that things would be okay, because by this point I've accepted that everyone who is not the protagonist of the story is a demon in disguise, but there is an interesting outcome to this one. Despite his sincere efforts to save Sadie's life, Lucas inevitably botches the operation and is manically mocked by the voices on the phone and discovers himself now trapped in the hospital to forever face torment like Mitch in the motel. However, the voices, which throughout echo like fragmented memories of a traumatizing experience in his former life, potentially talking to doctors, the police, a therapist, his own wife, do begin to change tone. While Lucas does hold himself accountable for his mistake, he asserts he cannot be left totally at fault given the extraordinary circumstances of a girl suddenly appearing on an empty road in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night. The voices actually agree and tell him he can go. It cannot be solely his fault. He's then directed to a locker containing a clean pair of clothes, symbolizing a fresh newborn start, because unlike the other characters up to this point, he does get to leave and seemingly redeem himself. Now, we could sit here and ethically debate the burden of responsibility on both parties, but I also have this wild theory that Lucas was maybe a surgeon in his former life and holds himself guilty for a procedure that went wrong. The demons that mock him are self-inflicted, despite his every effort at atonement. Even if it was in fact a car accident in his former life, he still attempts to rectify his mistake rather than run away from it, unlike the other characters. After all, he could have made the immoral choice of just abandoning Sadie on this desert road in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night, where it may have taken days before anyone found her, but he didn't. He stopped and did what he felt was right. As Lucas leaves town, we transition to our next story, where we see the responder on the phone enter a bar that's soon besieged by a manic gun-wielding man called Danny, claiming to be searching for his sister Jessie for 13 years. He's suddenly attacked by one of the customers, revealing that the locals are all definitely demons and part of the same ritualistic cult slowly consuming the town. In fact, the demons can literally see into another plane of existence where spirits await a new human vessel to take. Now, what's interesting about this one, entitled Jailbreak, is that Danny is clearly aware of the strangeness of the town before he even gets to it, and upon finding his sister tattooing satanic insignias, she reveals she chose to be here. Those who sinfully submit become part of its residency, but those who keep resisting remain trapped in a cycle of torment unless they truly find redemption like Lucas. While forcefully trying to get Jessie out of town, she tells Danny that there is no escape for her, noting the literal pit of darkness beyond the borders of the town. She has willingly accepted her fate. She admits she killed her parents simply because she wanted to, and this place is made for people like her. And well, she loves it. She's effectively already home. Danny, on the other hand, is a good person and refuses to let her go, but is soon dragged from his car by lost souls who I don't think are demons, but rather those who find themselves caught in the crossfire of other sinners. The way I see it, the film becomes increasingly somber as it goes along, as each character faces a unique outcome. Mitch resigns to his torment, Sadie keeps trying to run away from it, and Lucas is redeemed. But what separates this story from the others is that while Jessie is the sinner in question, she's happy where she is. Instead, the tragedy falls onto Danny, an innocent soul who forgave his sister and wants to help her despite the burden she has caused. But being that he breached the boundaries of hell to save her, he's then symbolically stripped of his soul, which mirrors Lucas being redeemed by receiving fresh clothes. It ultimately insinuates to me that good souls can still be lost in their own purgatory on the fringes of this hellscape. Our final tale, entitled The Way In, fittingly loops us back to the beginning, where we're introduced to a freshman called Jem, who's vacationing with her parents before going to college. This one is basically The Strangers, where 3 masked men invade their house and take Jem's parents hostage while she hides. The DJ tells us, kiss the past goodbye and get ready to move on with your life. You can't hold on forever, which on the surface refers to Jem's transition to college, but underneath serves as a moral to the perpetrators, who of course are soon revealed to be Jack and Mitch. And another guy, but I don't remember his name and he dies anyway. The perpetrators tell the father Daryl an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and kill his wife, seemingly as vengeance for causing the death of Mitch's daughter Catherine. Again, we don't know the exact specifics of what happened, but I'm inclined to lean on this being a hit and run given the constant driving motifs throughout and the look of shock on Daryl's wife's face when one of the men whispers something to her. However, in both anger and despair, Mitch takes his own twisted justification too far and ends up murdering Daryl as well, soon prompting Jem to retaliate before she's also killed by a soon remorseful Mitch, realizing what he's done to an innocent girl that reminded him of his own. You may notice that the setting is identical to the motel Mitch will later find himself confined in and forever tormented by a senseless tragedy made out of his own inability to forgive. Who knows, maybe Daryl was destined for his own purgatory. Hell, helplessly witnessing his own wife get murdered before him could be it. However, just before the dust can settle, the Death Angels erupt from the bodies of the family to continue not only the vicious cycle of vengeance, but dooming all those involved to repeat the horrors of their past. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Please comment your thoughts below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't. Follow me on Twitch for live streams of various horror games, and on Instagram for general life stuff. And until next time, stay safe, stay away from the road to damnation, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.